The first days at boot camp were always the hardest, but for her, they were a different kind of trial. The moment she arrived, dragging her worn duffel bag across the training grounds, the eyes of the other recruits seemed to burn into her back. She was smaller than most, lean where others were broad, and she carried herself with a quietness that stood out in a place where bravado was the currency of survival. It didn't take long before the whispers began, followed by smirks and mocking laughter. "She won't last a week," one of the men muttered under his breath, loud enough for others to hear. Another chuckled, "Bet she cries before sunrise." Even some of the women, who themselves had fought for a place in the ranks, turned cold, as if her calm demeanor threatened to reflect their own insecurities. Every insult rolled through the air, sharp and stinging, but she never flinched. She kept her eyes fixed ahead, her jaw set in quiet defiance. The drills were brutal, endless push-ups until arms trembled, long runs under the blistering sun, and obstacle courses designed to strip away the weak. She stumbled more than once, knees scraping against gravel, breath tearing at her lungs, but each time she pushed herself back up, wordless and steady. The jeers grew louder when she faltered, yet she never gave them the satisfaction of seeing her break. At night, when the barracks finally fell silent and the mocking voices drifted into snores, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. She thought of the promise she had made, the weight she carried like armor no one could see. Beneath her uniform, ink rested against her skin, pressed close to her heart and spine. It wasn't just decoration, it was memory, sacrifice, and fire. She didn't need to explain herself to those who mocked her, they hadn't earned the right to know. Still, there were moments when loneliness pressed hard against her ribs, when their laughter echoed louder than her heartbeat. In those moments, she reached for the strength hidden inside her, whispering to herself words only she understood. The tattoo on her back was not just ink, it was a story carved in silence, a reminder that she was not truly alone. Every step she took, every insult she endured, was part of a path that would one day demand recognition. For now, she let them mock. Soon enough, the truth would silence them. The sun blazed mercilessly over the training grounds, turning the gravel beneath their boots into hot shards that bit at the soles of their feet. Sweat ran down every forehead, dripping into eyes that stung with salt, but no one dared wipe it away. Inspection day was sacred, the moment when the commander's eyes swept over each recruit like a scalpel, exposing weakness, discipline, or strength. They stood in rigid lines, uniforms clinging to their bodies, hearts thundering in their chests. She stood among them, still and silent, her face unreadable. Inside, her pulse was steady, slower than most. She had trained herself to endure eyes, whispers, and judgment. Today would be no different, or so she thought. The commander moved with the sharp precision of a blade, boots striking in rhythm, gaze cutting through each recruit as if weighing their very souls. He stopped in front of one, adjusted a collar, barked at another for dirt under his nails. Every correction carried weight, every pause carved silence deeper into the air. When at last he reached her, the quiet thickened. His eyes narrowed as if he had been waiting for this moment, as though her presence had always carried a question mark he intended to erase. "Remove your top layer," he ordered. His tone was brisk, leaving no room for hesitation. Without flinching, she obeyed. Fingers worked quickly, tugging at the buttons before peeling off the outer shirt, revealing the plain undershirt beneath. For a brief second, the usual smirks flickered among the line, another chance to mock her, another crack in her armor. But when she turned as commanded, when the fabric stretched and fell, exposing the skin of her back, everything shifted. The laughter died before it could take shape. The commander froze. His hand, usually so firm and commanding, trembled ever so slightly at his side. His face drained of color, lips parting as if he had seen a ghost etched into her flesh. There, across her shoulders, stretched a tattoo, bold, deliberate, unmistakable. It was not random ink scrawled in rebellion. It was a symbol, precise and sharp, carved into history itself. He knew it instantly. He had seen it before, carried on the back of someone who had once stood where she stood, someone who had bled and fallen under his command. The air grew heavy, the silence suffocating. The recruits exchanged confused glances, their whispers dying in their throats. None of them understood why the commander, a man carved from stone, suddenly looked as though the ground had shifted beneath him. He stepped closer, his voice dropping lower, no longer sharp but unsteady, as though pulled back into a memory he had buried. His eyes stayed locked on the ink, the mark that tied her to a story none of them yet knew. The line of recruits wavered with unease, their earlier confidence shattered by the commander's sudden change in demeanor. Where there had once been smirks and sidelong glances, there was now only silence, a nervous kind of stillness that pressed down on them heavier than the midday heat. They could not see clearly what was inked into her skin, only the outline of something fierce, something old, but they could read the commander's face, and that alone was enough to strip the laughter from their throats. He stepped closer, his boots crunching against the gravel, though the sound seemed distant in the tension that hung between them. His eyes, so often sharp with authority, now held a weight that even the youngest recruit could sense. He reached out a hand, stopping just short of touching the tattoo, then drew it back as though the ink itself might burn him. His voice came low, stripped of its usual command. "Where did you get this?" She didn't flinch. Instead, she turned her head slightly, enough to meet his gaze from over her shoulder. Her voice was calm, steady, the same voice she had used to carry herself through every insult, every challenge since arriving. "It belonged to my brother," she said softly, yet every word carried. "He served under you." The name that followed dropped like a stone into a still pond. A ripple of recognition flashed across the commander's face, tightening his jaw, drawing shadows into his eyes. It was a name he had not heard in years, a name tied to blood, to sacrifice, to nights haunted by memory. He had once barked orders to that soldier, once watched him push beyond exhaustion, once seen him stand when others fell. And he had also watched him be carried away, silent, leaving behind only the mark now inked onto his sister's back. The commander's throat worked as though he were swallowing words he could not let out. The recruits shifted uneasily, sensing they were witnessing something far beyond their understanding. For the first time, they realized the quiet woman they had mocked was tethered to a story larger than any of them. She was not weak, she was legacy, she was a reminder. The commander finally straightened, his composure returning like a mask slipping back into place, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. He gave no explanation to the others, only a sharp order for the line to stand at attention. Yet his eyes lingered on her, filled not with doubt but with a recognition so heavy it silenced the entire field. From that day forward, everything shifted in the barracks. The cruel laughter that had once followed her like a shadow faded into silence, replaced by sidelong glances heavy with curiosity and shame. The recruits who had mocked her strength, called her fragile, and dismissed her as a burden now found themselves uneasy in her presence. It wasn't fear exactly, but something more complex, an awareness that she carried a truth greater than their shallow judgments. None dared whisper behind her back anymore. In the long nights when the bunks creaked with restless turning, they kept their thoughts to themselves, remembering the commander's face when he saw her tattoo. That memory alone was enough to choke their words. The commander, too, was different. He never explained what the ink meant, never shared the memory it had ripped from the depths of his past. But his tone with her changed. Where once he barked her name with doubt edged in his voice, now he spoke it with measured weight, his orders sharper, but also more respectful. When drills pushed the recruits to breaking, his eyes lingered on her, not with suspicion, but with something closer to recognition, as though he knew she had already endured worse than anything the training grounds could offer. She carried on as before, never gloating, never seeking the respect that began to quietly grow around her. She still ran until her lungs burned, still pushed her body against the edge of exhaustion, still endured the aching silence of the nights. Yet inside, something had shifted. The mocking voices that once gnawed at her resolve were gone, replaced by the echo of her brother's memory, the weight of the mark she bore proudly across her back. She hadn't come to Bootcamp to be seen. She had come to honor a promise, to carry forward the legacy of someone who had given everything. Now, without saying a word, the others were beginning to see that too. One evening, as the recruits gathered after drills, a younger soldier approached her, hesitant, eyes lowered. "Was it true?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying the fragile respect of someone who had learned shame. She looked at him for a long moment, then simply nodded. No more words were needed. The truth of who she was and what she carried had already spoken louder than anything she could have said. In a place designed to break them down and strip them bare, Her strength had not come from muscle or noise, but from the ink carved into her skin and the fire etched into her soul. The tattoo was more than memory. It was a shield, a warning, and a story that no one would ever again dare to mock.